Hey everyone, this is Curtis. I am Atlanta resident, also holistic health expert, and I organize with community movement builders. So just wanted to talk today about the war on the environment and the war on environmentalists. We're living in very dangerous times. My heart goes out to all people in New York and all the East Coast who are dealing with the effects of the wildfire smoke. Unfortunately, it's not surprising. Canada is a huge exporter of dirty fuel in the term dirty fuel. It being tar sands, and yeah, it's just not surprising that this very destructive process of literally mining the ground for oil and then sending that oil all throughout pipelines all throughout North America, would further destroy the environment, particularly indigenous communities. Because North America used to be indigenous land. It still is. But yeah, it is currently being colonized by white settlers and destroyed by those white settlers as well too. And those settlers and their settler businesses have just developed these very destructive, extractive industries that are literally bringing the planet to extinction. But in the midst of that, you have a situation, what's going on in Atlanta, where the Atlanta Police Foundation is trying to build a project known as Cop City. Cop City is a militarized police training facility that they're planning to build in the South River Forest, which is the largest intact urban forest in the United States. People have protested about this for 2 years. They marched, they petitioned, they've done everything imaginable you can name. And city officials like, we don't give a fuck you and the trees that you all love. We're gonna build Cop City. Herschel Walker said, he made a comment, dumbass Herschel Walker. He said, I think, someone asked him a question, I think in regards to the environment. He was like, I want more cops, not trees. And these motherfuckers in Atlanta have pretty much said the same things. All these bourgeois Negroes have said they want more cops, not trees. So, the predicament that we're in right now, is that, essentially, people are literally being murdered by the millions due to climate change, due to ecological devastation, and the people who oppose that, particularly the people who take radical responses to that, are being criminalized and terrorized. And Jim Crow Joe Biden, when he, got elected as president, the first thing he did, this is right after the January 6th insurrection, where you literally had Nazis, Confederates, and all types of crackers storming the Capitol to wage a coup. He announced that, okay, in the midst of this white domestic terrorist threat, which has always been a threat for the past 400 years now, ever since Columbus landed here, he announced that people who were environmentalists, people who were pro-choice advocates, i.e. feminists, people who were racial justice advocates, i.e. black people, people who were anarchists, i.e. some so-called antifa crowd, people who, who were animal rights activists, people, who wanted to oppose the very destructive animal agriculture business. They are now in the same category as people who are Klansmen, people who are pro-life fascists who want to bomb abortion clinics. We're dealing with the same people. And it's slick because, if any of you all have seen the movie, it's a really great movie, Judas and the Black Messiah. As the FBI agent was recruiting the informant, I forget his name now, but as he was recruiting the informant to infiltrate the Black Panther Party, he emphasized, I support, the Black struggle, but these Black Panthers, they're the equivalent to the Klan. They want to start a race war and just ridiculous nonsense. And literally the same exact rhetoric that the federal government used to justify COINTELPRO and the widespread repression and continued repression upon Black radicals, Indigenous activists, people who are fighting for Puerto Rican liberation, and the like, is now being used in 2023 to criminalize and terrorize people who literally want to defend the environment, defend Black life, defend a woman's right to choose. They're now being lumped in with people who want to commit genocide, as if the people who want to shut down pipelines are the same motherfuckers that want to, blow up church people where Black people go. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. And we know that in reality, all that smoke and mirrors. When the feds say, they want to go after white supremacists, they don't want to go after white supremacists. They want to recruit the white supremacists. They want to bring in the neo-Nazis and the Proud Boys into the fold. They have their grievances, but hey, help us to repress them. Help us to attack the left or to attack BLM or to attack Indigenous folks. I know, you might have your grievances, this, that, and third, but come into the fold. And for the most part, that's what the feds do. The FBI, law enforcement is filled with Proud Boys, with neo-Nazis, with all types of extreme, far-right actors who literally want to, bring about like a civil war in America. So they're never the targets. So that's why even some people like Glenn Greenwald, we're kind of calling this out, like, yeah, this is going to be kind of like, this is going to be pretty bad, because it was announced in early 2021 that Biden was, intentional upon, attacking these so-called bad actors, and they'll use, examples like the Klan and maybe people who are, people who are sovereign citizens. They'll use kind of like these, kind of white extremists as the face, when in reality, it's Black and brown folks who are going to be the targets, as in the case with all law enforcement in this country. So, we had a situation in 2021, also in September, where the Atlanta City Council, again, against the public comment from the city, decided to approve the lease that gives the Atlanta Police Foundation the lease to build upon Cop City. And from that point, the movement for Cop City had really sprung up. Excuse me, there had been a lot of activism going on before then, but it really kind of, sprung up, and a lot of this had been a continuation from the movements that had occurred when Trump got elected in 2016, where you had like some of the so-called radical left, as Trump called them, the antifa crowd, some of the anarchists, even BLM. A lot of that organizing had been continuation of a lot of organizing had taken place, through the election of Trump, and particularly the radicalism. Because remember, you had the Nazis getting punched during Trump's inauguration. So, particularly some of these white folks, they had really kind of, become pretty radical. So, and that's why when George Floyd was murdered, and everything, and all those massive uprisings took place, Trump was like, hey, Antifa, BLM, domestic terrorist, and it was shocking, like, what, terrorist, and Trump, he was very open about, hey, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, hey, let's just beat the protesters over the heads. When protesters are taking place right in front of the Capitol, I'm going to pepper spray them to eliminate them, and walk across the street with my white supremacist symbol, also known as the Bible, for a little photo op. So he was very brazen, like, fuck y'all, I'm gonna shoot y'all, I'm gonna murder y'all, and he did. When the white Antifa activist in Oregon, I forget his name, was murdered by US Marshals, they just pulled up in unmarked cars and just started blazing. Trump bragged about it. He was like, yeah, I shot him and I'll shoot some more. So the environment was was already there, for that radicalism to take place and for the extreme action by the U.S. government. So Biden just continued it. He continued it, of course, in more, softer language. Oh, we're gonna go after white supremacists, and we're gonna go after the January 6th insurrectionists and da 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 da. But once all that shit died down, and keep in mind, most of the January 6th insurrectionists have not been arrested. There was thousands of them motherfuckers out there at the Capitol, and they have not been arrested, and they will not be arrested, because a lot of them were supported by the feds and by the cops, along with Supreme Court justices. Excuse me, Clarence Thomas. Excuse me, on my throat. So they're not going to really face justice. So once, as I mentioned, the copcity vote took place, people took radical action. They're like, hey, we're going to occupy this forest where they want to build the facility. And they did that. They did that successfully. They built a whole kind of village, based upon mutual aid, a non-hierarchical organizational structure, and just, and it had people from different political frameworks, people who were socialists, people who were anarchists, people who were maybe just, abolitionists, people who are environmentalists, and that's where you had the non-binary Afro-Venezuelan activist Tortuguita. They have been involved in mutual aid projects for a long time. They had been doing a lot of mutual aid work in Florida for the immigrant community, fighting against the oppression against ICE, and they came up here and felt at home, found a community where, as I think the Daily Show, I forget my man's name, the black comedian on Daily Show. He was talking about how people were just giving out massages, and doing meditations. It was a very kind of hippie thing going on there, but it was successful. And and the government kind of eased back. They were kind of like, okay, hopefully they'll leave. But as the occupation continued and continued and continued, and as it began to get more and more media coverage in the Rolling Stone, in Vice, in AJ, and all these different outlets, it became a concern. It became something where the government had to send a message that this type of protest is not allowed. This is a bad example. So oftentimes the government will criminalize bad examples. Examples of mutual aid, of mutual solidarity, of cross collaboration, of just occupying public spaces, of there not being a very kind of a non-hierarchical organization. They don't like that shit. They don't like shit like that. They don't all that kind of kind of alternative visions or even alternative approaches to structuring society. Nah, that's a threat. Nah, we got to get rid of that shit. So, since about June of 2022, government came in there, started doing raids, started conducting raids, SWAT raids, where they were pepper ball spraying them, tear gassing them, and just overall harassing them. Tearing down their tents, tearing down their tree houses, using all types of anti-gay slurs, just typical police harassment, and the activists fought back. But keep in mind that it was kind of like it was a very kind of disorganized group of people. So the government has no idea who might have thrown some fireworks at the police. Of course, nobody was injured. Who might have thrown some rocks at the construction crews that came inside to start doing construction in the facility. So they really had no idea. But from the very beginning, the fact that they were waging civil disobedience and actually occupying a public space, of course, caught the attention of DHS and the FBI under Biden's new directive to go after domestic terrorists, because they were the terrorists that, that they had talked about targeting. I mean, this is like a perfect case study. Hey, kind of been, ain't nothing really popping off on Black Lives Matter, even though police are murdering Black people left and right. Ain't nothing popping off on the environmental movement. The leftists are kind of all disorganized and fighting on Twitter about dumb shit. So, oh my God, here's a group of socialists, abolitionists, environmentalists, and anarchists in one space in Atlanta, like organizing and trying to fight, a police training facility. Oh my God, let's, bring out the tea and cookies. Let's go. Let's get them. So yeah, it was, hey, let's go. So DHS, FBI, immediately, hey, I mean, I don't have the official documents, but I know just from some of the information that came out with the recent podcast about how FBI had infiltrated the Black Lives Matter movement and had, brought in different agent provocateurs to bring some of those terror charges against some of the activists. I'm sure that they became a target very early on and were targeted for surveillance, for infiltration, and for heavy police repression. So it continued into early 2022. There was different, even like protests outside of the forest that were met with heavy-handed police responses, criminalization of free speech, and the like. And then the election, 2022 was an election year. So, the government had to kind of be a little cool, even Brian Kemp, because he was facing a rematch against Stacey Abrams. And, it was considered to be, it was considered to be a closer election, given that Georgia had swung blue. And, it had the potential to be a very, very close election. Now, of course, Brian Kemp made sure that it wasn't close by suppressing mail-in ballots by his 2021 voter suppression bill. So he was able to kind of win the election. But I remember in October 2022, when Brian Kemp announced that these people who were occupying the forest were domestic terrorists, and I was like, whoa, because whenever the government starts using that T word, it's about to start being some bodies dropping. They're about to start murdering folks. I'm like, oh shit. That, I was like, okay. I was like, I don't think he's going to do anything now because, he's, if he goes in there heavy-handed, like, before the election, people, some of those white moderates, might be a little like, sketchy about supporting someone, who's going to go in there and kind of murder a tree hugger. So, he waited, and then he got elected in December of 2022. He came in there and, he launched a raid. It was a militarized police raid. And, at that time, they start charging folks with domestic terrorism. I was like, you know what? Here it goes. And I wasn't necessarily as hip to the game of the domestic terrorism law that was passed in 2018 here in Georgia. But yeah, it was right on brand. Like, okay, they used the language and then they actually, kind of put the language to action. So, and that raid was horrible. They had gassed some of the protesters for 8 hours. SWAT teams, DHS, FBI, Georgia State Patrol, DeKalb County Police, APD, GBI, just the whole, like, pretty much every single fucking law enforcement agency in the country was there. So they did, arrested some people, charged them with domestic terrorism. There were activists in Atlanta. Shout out to community movement builders and some of the other people. The Atlanta Solidarity Fund immediately kind of were like, hey, this is like a major escalation. Someone's going to end up getting killed. A month later, in January 2023, someone does get killed. And this was not an accident. This was a carefully planned military operation to have a political assassination of Tortuguita, who had their hands up and had the weapon on them. I firmly believe that, that the feds had already infiltrated the movement and had targeted Tortuguita for a specific reason. Number one, that they were indigenous, they were brown. Number two, that they had a history of buying a weapon, maybe, at some point in their life, so they can say, oh, they bought a weapon at, at some point in their life, and that's what they had on them. They, I firmly believe, and also they knew where to go, like, because remember now you're in a forest, so how did the police know, like, to just, to target this particular activist, who was in a tent. So I believe they had inside information. Of course, I'm sure that information won't come soon now, but I believe soon freedom of information discoveries will kind of bring information to light. But they were definitely targeted because number one of their nationality, and also the fact that they were a previous gun owner, they were targeted. And they, because remember now, the first raid in December, and I think that was kind of like a warning shot, like, okay, hey, get the fuck about the forest. All you people have been here for a year now. It's time to go. Hey, we got to clear the site. But people still occupied the forest, even in the midst of all that danger. Very brave souls. And then it became like, okay, we got to send a clear message now. We got to start murdering folks, which they did. If you know the history of terrorism, terrorism is oftentimes very selective, meaning that terrorism is not always a situation where you just commit genocide, where you just wipe out every single activist, every single group of people within a population that you want to control. Oftentimes, terrorism is selective. So, for example, when the United States funded the Contras, who Reagan considered to be the freedom fighters, interesting choice of word because the original freedom, the equivalent to the founding fathers, excuse me, and they were freedom fighters too, he called them. Of course, the founding fathers were about genocide as well. So interesting choice of words. But when the CIA trained the Contras, they oftentimes would go into villages and they wouldn't kill the entire village. They would kill like some people in the village. They would kidnap some of the girls, and it would terrorize and pacify that entire community, and prevent them from, even supporting or even thinking about joining the resistance. But it was a campaign of selective terror. So, we're not going to wipe out the entire village, even though oftentimes that was used. We're gonna selectively murder people, and oftentimes murder innocents, just to intimidate the population, let them know who's boss, let them know we're in control, and to quell any other potential resistance. So that was the purpose of this raid. It wasn't necessarily to wipe out all the activists, to wipe out the entire movement, but to intimidate the movement and to send a very clear message that, hey, if you oppose Cop City, if you oppose the funding of the police, as Biden said, if you oppose, all the increased police violence and all the white backlash that is coming from the George Floyd protests, we got a bullet with your name on it, and we're going to use it. So it was a very kind of a case of selective terror, where we're going to, kill one person to intimidate millions, and it didn't work, thankfully. I would say in some cases it did work. People, rightfully so, quit occupying the forest. More than likely, there probably were some people who were probably discouraged or rightfully afraid from joining the movement. But again, this is a political assassination. And one thing to know about political assassinations is that they're well thought out, they're well planned. The raid where Tortuguita was murdered contained DHS, it contained FBI, it contained ICE, it contained Georgia State Patrol, it contained the DeKalb County Police, the APD, GBI. It contained a broad swath of federal, state, and local agencies. So it was, I believe it was very carefully targeted. GBI gave their so-called their death squad, because Tortuguita was shot by nearly 8 different officers, and a hail of bullets, and they even pepper sprayed them before they shot them. They had told the police officers that, oh yeah, this is a well organized group, anti-police, they throw rocks at cops, they throw fireworks at cops, they want to kill cops, they have guns, they have booby traps, they have bombs, all this propaganda. Same should they say whenever the United States goes in there to invade a foreign country. When they're ready for war. Oh my God, Iraq has nuclear weapons, they have chemical weapons, they're raping baby, just all this bullshit. So they pretty much have kind of primed the cops like to shoot first, ask questions later. And that's exactly what the cops did. And they lied, of course, and said, oh, Tortuguita shot first. That was proven to be a lie. They had lied several times. Throughout this entire investigation, has come out to find that Tortuguita did not have any gunpowder residue on their hands, and their hands were up. Yeah, and even further, like, they had previously said, like, they don't believe in violence, because, the state has a monopoly on violence and they can always use more violence. And they're kind of very, very much a pacifist and a tree hugger. So the idea that they went from just this, I don't believe in guns, I'm a tree hugger, I want to do yoga, meditation, to I'm going to shoot some cops like when they're surrounding me is complete and utter hogwash. So yeah, but again, the state has painted a very careful narrative. And recently, the GBI has launched a raid on the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. And ever since the very beginning, the local officials have said, this Defend the Atlanta Forest movement is a domestic violent extremist, according to DHS. Blah 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 blah. But then DHS will say, well, we don't characterize any group as violent terrorists. We just issue bulletins about violent terrorists, but we don't, categorize them. And DHS has, over the past several months, continued to label cop city activists as terrorists. Now, they may not label them officially as terrorists, but DHS considers them to be terrorists. As a matter of fact, after the raid in January, the FBI got involved, and some of the people who were arrested under domestic terrorism charges were going to be facing potential federal charges. So FBI, DHS, they may not officially, label this, this group or this group of activists to be terrorists, but behind the paperwork, they consider them to be terrorists. But so essentially, there's been a cat and mouse game of, DHS calls them terrorists, that's why we treat them as terrorists. DHS like we don't call them terrorists, so I don't know why I treat them as terrorists, even though we put out bulletins of them as terrorists constantly, and we're investigating them as terrorists, and we're there when these terrorists get murdered under militarized police raids. It's all smoke and mirrors, because again, Biden and Biden's war on terror is responsible for the murder of this indigenous tree hugger. Period. Point blank. This is part of Biden's war on the left, particularly on the radical left, which Trump started, and it's a part of the overall federal designation of environmentalists, animal rights activists, Black Lives Matter people, as terrorists, which has existed, the history of COINTELPRO, even up to the 1920s, for a long time. There's a great book on this that talks about how the feds literally, they don't even investigate white supremacists. They just target environmentalists, animal rights activists, and Black people, Indigenous people. That's it. They don't even look at, you can be a Nazi talking about, I'm going to blow up, the World Trade Center, whatever. They don't give a fuck about none of that shit. They only care about people who are Black, brown, people who like animals, people who like the environment. That's it. All the other folks, do whatever the fuck you want. Mass shootings, whatever. And this official directive has been going on for a long time. Particularly since the 90s when the environmental movement became very, very radical and started embracing more direct action tactics, more civil disobedience, more eco-sabotage, as documented in the film How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which is considered to be a domestic terrorist threat by DHS. So those group of kind of radicals have been considered to be terrorists for a very long time. Biden's war on terror has revealed its ugly face. So I just wanted to mention that and kind of add some clarity, because I know there's been a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. But in reality, DHS, FBI, if you're against Cop City, and the funding of cop structure, then you're a terrorist, period. So, so all this in Tortuguita's untimely demise at the hands of the state is definitely something that, goes direct to the president's desk. Just like, the political assassination of MLK goes to LBJ's desk, the political assassination of Malcolm X goes to LBJ's desk because he was trying to bring a petition accusing the United States of genocide in 1964. MLK was speaking out against the Vietnam War and planning to shut down D.C. with a multiracial poor people's campaign. Again, Fred Hampton's death goes back to Nixon's. Everything and happening in this country is top down. So right now, under this capitalist system, there is a war on the environment. There are millions of people right now who cannot fucking breathe. They cannot breathe because the capitalists are destroying the environment. You have an industrial economy that is just literally pillaging everything in its midst, tearing down all the trees, poisoning all the water, genetically modifying all the species, just destroying everything. And it's causing wildfires and hurricanes and monsoons and catastrophic flooding. And the people who are trying to fight that, oftentimes using very radical methods that don't involve in harming people and don't involve selective terror, don't involve like just blowing up church buildings, they are being criminalized, they are being terrorized, and they are being murdered. And this is a global phenomenon. As the world burns, environmentalists are being murdered. It's happening in Brazil, in Honduras, and all throughout the world. So this is a very dangerous phenomenon, and it's something that is not unique. That America has not embraced, and that's why we must always have solidarity with the natural living world, not the goddamn economy. I don't care if you call the economy capitalism, socialism, whatever the fuck you call it. The economy is killing the planet. So either we can have an economy, we can have an environment, but we can't have both. And point fact, people who are opposing just the death grips of the economy are getting murdered left and right. And rest in power to Tortuguita. And please definitely get involved in the stopcopcity movement. And just know, for all of you who are organizing against this movement, that DHS considers you to be a target. Of course, you're a target by, white supremacist Governor Kemp. But yeah, the feds are watching, they're listening, they're trying to infiltrate movements, disrupt them, doing everything they've been doing for the past, 100 years or so. Yeah. So peace and love to everybody. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Let's heal the world. Let's heal the environment. Let's heal each other. Peace.